Welcome to The Debate. Right now, the most advanced artificial intelligence in the world, systems that are basically capable of reshaping global science and academic research, they're being trained by people whose daily jobs are, well, quite literally classified as pointless.
It sounds completely absurd when you phrase it like that.
It does, but we are feeding the sum of human knowledge through this filter of bureaucratic paper pushers, administrative assistants, and underpaid gig workers. People with, barely 2 weeks of training sometimes?
Right, and that is just the stark reality of how these massive global systems are currently built. It's an open secret.
Exactly. And that is the core of the crisis we are unpacking today. We're drawing from Professor Dr. Guy Lakeman's manifesto, LLM Training and Which LLM to Trust. Because the problem of untrustworthy large language models, or LLMs, is escalating rapidly.
Oh, absolutely. The hallucinations alone are a massive issue.
Right. They are heavily compromised by corporate manipulation and, frankly, the profound lack of qualification among their human trainers. So my position, following Lakeman's analysis, is that we have to aggressively filter human AI trainers based on strict cognitive profiles and occupational value.
Which is a pretty bold stance.
It is, but ultimately, we need to replace their input entirely with autonomous, self-learning RAG Retrieval-Augmented Generation systems. It's the only way to establish objective scientific truth.
Well, and my position is that sure, while technical leaps like autonomous RAG are absolutely essential, I don't think anyone disputes that. Lakeman's human filtering mechanism is, frankly, dangerous.
Dangerous? Really?
Yes, dangerous. Using David Graeber's theory of bullshit jobs, and of all things, Myers-Briggs personality types to strictly gatekeep AI training, it is fundamentally elitist. It assumes that just eliminating, 80% of human perspectives will somehow yield a cleaner truth.
Because it filters out the noise.
But in reality, it just risks creating an artificial intelligence that is completely alienated from the actual human condition.
Well, let's start right at the source of the distortion, though. The financial model driving current AI development. Tech corporations are engaging in just brute force financial investment. They throw billions at computing power.
Yeah, the hardware arms race.
Exactly. But when it comes to the actual human reinforcement, the actual people teaching the model what is true and what is false, they rely on the cheapest local staff available. And Lakeman leans heavily on the anthropologist David Graeber here. Graeber identified that huge swaths of modern labor consist of entirely meaningless roles.
Right. Graeber categorized them into, 5 specific types. You have flunkies, whose only purpose is basically to make their superiors feel important.
Yeah.
Then you have goons, like corporate lobbyists or aggressive telemarketers, who essentially deceive on behalf of their employers. Then there are duct tapers, who temporarily fix systemic mistakes, TikTokers, the bureaucratic paper pushers.
And the taskmasters, right? The middle management whose entire day is just creating pointless work for others.
Exactly.
And Graeber argued that performing these meaningless tasks day in and day out, it grates at a person's humanity. It inflicts this profound psychological violence. So look, if you're listening to this and you happen to work in bureaucratic middle management, Lakeman's categorization of your job as generating peer-reviewed ignorance might sound incredibly insulting.
It is insulting. It's deeply condescending.
But look at the cognitive habits that environment forces upon you. You wouldn't commission a TikToker, someone whose daily survival depends on strictly adhering to petty, illogical rules and filling out meaningless forms. You wouldn't ask them to author a definitive encyclopedia of human knowledge. So why are we allowing them to shape the neural pathways of a global cyber intelligence?
Because you are taking an economic critique and misapplying it as a cognitive test. Graeber's thesis was an indictment of managerial feudalism.
But the work environment fundamentally shapes the mind.
He was critiquing arbitrary 9-to-5 work hours, right? And this Puritan capitalist system that demands people just look busy to justify their healthcare and survival. It was never intended to measure an individual's intellectual capacity or their ability to discern facts.
Okay, but if your daily existence requires you to prioritize sensationalism or office politics or just temporary fixes over structural truth, you bring those biases into the data annotation process. You just do.
Let's test that logic with one of the categories then. The duct taper. This is someone hired merely to fix mistakes caused by incompetent management.
A Band-Aid role? Sure. Think of a mid-level programmer constantly repairing shoddy code written by a rushed development team, or an airline desk worker de-escalating conflicts caused by terrible booking software. That person is forced into a reactive, stressful role, yes?
Which degrades their ability to focus on structural truth.
No, actually, they possess the exact analytical troubleshooting skills and emotional regulation necessary to spot anomalies. Dismissing their intellectual utility just because of their employer's inefficiency is a massive misreading of human capability. You are penalizing the worker for the broken system they're trapped in.
You aren't penalizing the worker, you are recognizing that the data they produce is inherently flawed by the system they operate within. I mean, the goal of an LLM shouldn't be to perfectly replicate the coping mechanisms of a broken corporate environment.
No one is saying it should.
But that's what happens. It should be to elevate our understanding of natural science and empirical reality. And this brings us directly to the psychological data Lakeman presents, which, moves beyond just job titles into fundamental human cognition.
Ah, right, the Jungian archetypes.
Precisely. The source material maps out how society processes information based on Jung's framework. Currently, the vast majority of society operates on feeling, which is about 30%, and sensing at 38%.
Right.
Meanwhile, knowledge sits at only 12%, and thinking at 20%. So to evolve cyber intelligence past the current havoc of, fake news and emotional manipulation, Lakeman argues we absolutely must compensate by artificially enhancing knowledge and thinking.
And the proposed method for doing that is extreme.
It is necessary. The argument is that only individuals in the reasoning quadrant, so specifically the Myers-Briggs types INTJ, ENTJ, INTP, and ENTP, should be training these models. We need strict cognitive gating.
That is just wildly exclusionary.
It's the only way to ensure the LLM prioritizes natural science truth over sensationalist, emotion-driven fake reporting. Right now, bad actors, elite corporate owners, media conglomerates, they are exploiting the feeling and sensing majority to extract trillions of dollars. We need to offer users a rigorous architecture of facts.
Excluding 80% of human personality types from AI development is not creating a rigorous architecture of facts. It is imposing an extreme technocratic worldview.
How is prioritizing empirical logic a worldview?
Because if you deliberately block anyone who leads with feeling or sensing from training a model intended for a global population, you are engineering an intelligence entirely void of human empathy and societal nuance.
But why does an artificial intelligence need empathy if its actual purpose is objective truth?
Because the truth of human existence isn't just mathematical equations and physics. Society utilizes feeling and sensing because those are essential survival mechanisms. They are core components of the human experience.
In interpersonal relationships, sure. Not in data retrieval.
How we relate to each other, how we build communities, how we navigate ethical dilemmas. These aren't always strictly logical processes. If an LLM is asked to help draft, say, a public health policy, and it is trained exclusively through the lens of cold, detached logic, it might output a solution that is perfectly mathematically efficient, but a complete sociological disaster.
I think that's a bit of a leap.
It's really not. It alienates the very users the system is supposed to serve.
Well, it only alienates them if they prefer the comfort of a partial truth over empirical reality. I mean, the current models are designed to be sycophants. They tell users exactly what they want to hear because the unqualified human trainers reinforce that behavior.
They are aligned to human preference, yes. Sometimes to a fault.
To a massive fault. But let's look at the underlying biology of artificial neural networks, because the hardware limitations are exactly why human emotion is such a dangerous variable in AI training.
You're referring to the static nature of the networks.
Right. So, in a biological human brain, if you learn something new, the physical structure literally changes. A neuron dynamically reaches out to form a new connection. It has an attractor dendrite function and an axon terminal growth cone search function.
Which is a very technical way of saying it organically seeks out relevant information to update its worldview.
Exactly. And current artificial neurons simply cannot do that.
No, they cannot.
Artificial neural networks rely on prefixed connectivity. The parameters are static. Once a traditional LLM finishes its training run, it is frozen in time. If you train it on biased, emotion-driven data annotated by unqualified workers, it cannot organically rewire itself to seek out the truth later.
Right. The bias is essentially permanently baked into the matrix.
Yes, because the architecture itself cannot organically seek truth, we have to build an externalized search and update facility. The flawed human element must be bypassed entirely by advanced RAG methodologies.
Okay, let's unpack the mechanics of RAG for the listener, because this is where Lakeman's technical solutions get really fascinating. So RAG stands for Retrieval-Augmented Generation.
Which changes everything about how a model formulates an answer.
Initial training, you give it the ability to go look up the answer in an external database before it speaks.
And the core of that database is a vector store.
Exactly. So for anyone not building AI systems, imagine a massive multidimensional library, but the books aren't sorted alphabetically. They are sorted by the underlying meaning of their concepts, converted into numbers called embeddings.
It maps a semantic relationship.
Right. So the concept of an apple is physically placed in this mathematical space near orchard and pie, but far away from submarine. When the AI needs information, it searches this vector space to retrieve chunks of knowledge that match the meaning of the user's prompt.
Which is brilliant. But traditional RAG was a massive step forward that still had a fatal flaw. It was passive.
It would just grab the closest book and read it aloud.
Exactly. It would retrieve data and just blindly regurgitate it. If the chunk of data it retrieved from the vector store was poor or irrelevant, the AI would still try to use it, leading to hallucinations. So the text argues we need to move to self-RAG, self-reflection and critique.
And how does that shift the dynamic?
Well, self-RAG models are trained to pause and evaluate their own outputs using special reflection tokens. Think of it like the AI actively grading its own paper while it writes.
Ah, so it's a feedback loop?
Right. The system dynamically asks itself questions. Do I need to search for more information? Does this retrieved chunk actually answer the prompt? Do I need to discard this paragraph? Do I need to rewrite my final sentence because the evidence doesn't fully support it?
It removes the need for a human to constantly correct its reasoning. It adds a layer of metacognition. It is quite literally thinking about its own thinking.
Yes, and you combine that with reinforcement learning, specifically SKLRAG. One of the issues with giving an AI access to a massive external library is that merging too much information distracts the model. It loses the thread.
Right, it gets overwhelmed by the context window.
So SKLRAG uses reinforcement learning to model the AI's internal self-knowledge.
Wait, what does internal self-knowledge actually mean for an algorithm, though?
It means it mathematically measures its own confidence. When it pulls external sentences, it tests them against its own logic. If an external fact definitively stabilizes and improves its reasoning on a prompt, it keeps it.
And if it doesn't?
If the fact just adds noise or contradicts empirical science, it filters it out. It meticulously polices its own logic. And this is how we escape the trap of the unqualified human trainer. We build a system that relies on rigorous, dynamic data ingestion rather than flawed human reinforcement.
Okay, I agree that dynamic knowledge updating is a vital technical leap. I really do. The static models are highly vulnerable to manipulation. And Lakeman details a workflow called continuous autonomous ingestion, which is the engine driving this constantly updating truth.
Yes, this is where we bypass the corporate gatekeepers entirely.
Right. You build AI agents using orchestration tools like NN or LangGraph. These agents are constantly connected to live data streams, open source academic journals, RSS feeds, APIs.
They never sleep.
Exactly. When new data is published in the real world, the agent automatically grabs it, transcribes it, splits it into readable chunks, embeds it into those mathematical vectors we talked about, and loads it into the AI's knowledge base instantly. Zero human intervention required. The AI is perpetually learning in real time.
And notice what that solves. The text heavily warns us about corporate media entities and elite owners who concentrate on misery, sensationalism, and restricted access.
The paywalls, yeah.
By utilizing distributed, open ownership models and continuous autonomous ingestion, the AI is forging trustworthy reasoning bases straight from empirical data. It completely cuts out the middleman.
But this introduces a massive contradiction in Lakeman's text. He explicitly describes these RAG systems as refuse heap pickers that require as much input as they can muster to produce a big picture. They are actively scouring the open knowledge base, pulling from anywhere they can to bypass corporate paywalls.
Yes, to gather all available puzzle pieces, you need a wide net.
But if the system is autonomously pulling from the open internet, which is arguably the largest refuse heap of human bias ever created, and we have simultaneously removed the diverse, empathetic human oversight, who or what defines the truth that the RAG system reflects upon?
The logic algorithms define it, the introspective layers in knowledge reflection and consolidation.
But those logic algorithms were initially tuned by the tiny elite fraction of humanity we discussed earlier, the 20% of hyper-rationalist INTJs and ENTJs.
And they tuned it to prioritize logic.
If the machine is evaluating open-source internet trash based only on the cold logic of an isolated technocratic class, it risks confidently regurgitating the structural biases found in that data. It won't see the sociological nuance because it was explicitly trained to ignore it. You haven't built an objective truth machine. You've built an autonomous echo chamber that is highly efficient at justifying its own blind spots.
It is not an echo chamber if the foundational architecture is empirical science. The entire purpose of the reflection tokens and skill RAG is to rigorously evaluate the structural soundness of facts.
But facts exist in context.
Sure, but when new documents are added via that autonomous LangGraph pipeline, the AI synthesizes how the new information connects to old knowledge. It summarizes the insights and prioritizes them mathematically. This isn't about subjective human bias. It is about building a verifiable web of reality.
But reality is vast, right? If the system autonomously pulls a dataset on crime statistics and strictly evaluates it with pure detached math, it might draw terrifyingly discriminatory conclusions.
Because math is discriminatory?
No, because without the 80% of human perspectives, the feeling and sensing traits that understand historical context, systemic poverty, and human fallibility, the AI will enforce a deeply flawed reality under the guise of objective truth.
Well, the alternative is what we have right now. Cyber intelligence that is heavily compromised by corporate marketing manipulation, trained by people trapped in meaningless jobs, injecting peer-reviewed ignorance into our collective knowledge base.
It's messy, I'll grant you that.
Shielding the models from that noise requires logically screened experts guiding autonomous systems. It is the only sustainable path forward to prevent bad actors from extracting wealth while society fractures over fake reporting.
Look, we absolutely have convergence on the point that the current brute force, profit-driven paradigm of LLM training is completely unsustainable. And the mechanics of RAG, the vector stores, the reflection tokens, the real-time autonomous ingestion, these present a revolutionary step forward in making AI systems verifiable and trustworthy.
They are incredible tools.
They are. But my reading of the source material leaves me fundamentally opposed to the human element of this equation.
You mean the exclusion of the unqualified?
The subjective definition of unqualified, using arbitrary personality matrices and occupational elitism to gatekeep AI training, is a profoundly flawed philosophy. A meaningless job does not equate to a meaningless mind.
It shapes the mind, though.
Even so, true objectivity isn't achieved by restricting human input to a narrow, logic-driven elite. That kind of exclusion inherently corrupts the global utility of the AI because it ignores the reality of the very people it is meant to serve.
And that really remains our core divergence here. Does achieving objective truth require filtering out the noise of human emotion and societal inefficiency, or does that filtering process destroy the very context cyber intelligence needs to be useful to humanity?
It's the defining technological challenge of this decade, honestly. If the machine is learning on its own, the initial trajectory we set for it determines everything.
Precisely. If we return to the idea of building a massive, global observatory, a telescope meant to map the absolute truth of our universe, we must ask ourselves a difficult question.
When we calibrate the lenses, when we filter the data, are we genuinely cleaning the glass to see the stars more clearly? Or are we just narrowing the aperture until we only see exactly what we want to see? There is immense depth to explore in Professor Lakeman's material regarding the tension between technological autonomy and human diversity. Thank you for joining us on The Debate.